Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, where I make videos about business, politics, and society. This week, I'm going to attempt to tackle a topic that's very complex and controversial: identity politics. I know it's a tough one, but I think it's important to talk about. So today, I want to try and answer the question, what role should identity play in our politics? So let's start with a simple definition. Identity politics is a tendency for people of a particular religion, race, social background, etc. to form exclusive political alliances, moving away from traditional broad-based party politics. Nothing inherently wrong with that. I think politics can be based on any distinction, and organizing around distinctions like race, gender, class, or any other common interest is not automatically a bad thing. The problem with identity politics today, and where I think all the toxicity comes from, is how these groups are organizing. And at the moment, identity politics is very much based on uniting around a common enemy. Why is America so racist? Well, it's white people. It's the basket of deplorables. They are the enemy. Or why is America so hateful? Well, it's the woke mob on the left. They are the enemy. On top of that, there's also a narrative being pushed, I think potentially more so on the left than the right, that if you're not one of us or you don't look like us, you can't possibly understand us, and thus you're also the enemy. Amy Chua, in her book titled Political Tribes, Group Instinct, and the Fate of Nations, wrote, "The new exclusivity is partly epistemological, claiming that out-group members cannot share in the knowledge possessed by in-group members. For example, you can't understand X if you are white, you can't understand Y because you're not a woman, you can't speak about Z because you're not queer. The idea of cultural appropriation insists, among other things, these are our group symbols, traditions, patrimony, and out-group members have no right to them." And of course, everyone has different experiences. I'm not denying that. But in a climate where we're constantly reminded of our differences and at any given point could be deemed the enemy, it's very hard to be an ally or engage in any truly open conversations, which leaves many of us, in a way, all alone on an island. It's like everybody is super suspicious of each other, constantly trying to identify who to vilify next, like Michael Moore suggesting that Texans don't deserve vaccines. And the end result is increasing tribalism. Chua continues in her book, "When groups feel threatened, they retreat into tribalism. They close ranks and become more insular, more defensive, more punitive, more us versus them." And what's worse is that this type of common enemy framework has allowed identity politics to be weaponized by our political elites for their own personal gain. The Democratic Party, they know that a lot of their base doesn't really like being perceived as bad people, so they shame their voters all the time. Like, for example, in 2016 and 2020, the establishment Democrats decided that no matter how popular his ideas might be, they did not want Bernie Sanders to become the leader of their party, so they did their best to label him as a racist and a sexist, and therefore you yourself would also be a racist or a sexist if you supported him. Or they'll hide behind identity to distract from their corrupt behavior. Oh, I'd like to remind everyone that Janet Yellen is our first female Treasury Secretary. But never mind the fact that she made millions of dollars giving speeches to the same Wall Street banks that she'll be regulating. No worries there. On the other side, the Republican Party, they know that a lot of their base is tired of tiptoeing around being politically correct, so they'll go out there and they'll rile up the Trump base to score points or to enhance their future political prospects. Or they know that a lot of their base has rallied around a common enemy, the Democrats, so let's just take the exact opposite positions on everything. Democrats like masks? Well, I say masks are useless. Gavin Newsom of California is a dictator who's keeping his state on perpetual lockdown. Well, I'm Greg Abbott, the freedom governor of Texas, and our state is going to be open 100%. To me, this is really bad because whatever consequences that come out of all of this, whether it's related to race or COVID or any other issue, no one's life is made any better, and it's almost always going to be normal people who are going to suffer, all because we chose on finding a common enemy rather than finding commonality between all of us. In his famous I Have a Dream speech, Dr. Martin Luther King stated, "The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom." This type of framework has historically worked much better in much more difficult times. For example, in an era of legalized segregation in this country, civil rights leaders were able to create a unifying populist movement that convinced the vast majority of members of Congress in both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to end legalized discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And that piece of legislation, along with a few others, had a tremendous impact on race relations in this country. I'm going to channel a bit of Cornel West here, but today we still have brothers and sisters who are not being given the same opportunity or not being treated with the same human dignity, and we have to do something about it. But the part that I don't get is why we're channeling so much energy into things like canceling Dr. Seuss books for being racist when they are, for the most part, promoting anti-racist messages. And if we do want to cancel something that's racist out of left field, let's talk about something that's actually racist, like freeways. Yeah, beyond just causing terrible traffic, freeways are also racist. There's a reason why freeways go through poor minority neighborhoods instead of white neighborhoods. In LA, for example, there's actually a missing link in the freeway system in Pasadena because white residents there had the resources to stop a freeway from being built, but other neighborhoods in LA, like the once thriving minority neighborhood of Boyle Heights, was decimated and is now the site of one of the nastiest freeway interchanges in the country. I could be wrong here, but when it comes to identity politics, if we continue down the path of exclusion, like canceling people or books or whatever, rather than inclusion, like what can we do to revitalize minority neighborhoods so they're on par with other neighborhoods, it allows not only right-wing politicians in the media to caricaturize liberals as the woke mob, but it leads regular people to throw up their hands and say, you know what, I'm done with all this. Like this Trump voter who said, maybe I'm just so sick of being called a bigot that my anger at the authoritarian left has pushed me to support this seriously flawed man. This last part is going to be a little preachy, but if we truly believe in the sentiment that all men and women are created equal and that we are endowed certain inalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the solution isn't necessarily to ignore identity, like some have suggested. It's to make identity more inclusive. So if you think about the role of identity when it comes to an issue like income inequality or class struggle, the solution should include elements of intersectionality because, like Martin Luther King said, it's all tied together. But at the same time, we should not be afraid to call out purposeful bad faith hijackings or misuses of identity that we see so much of in today's politics. And those are my thoughts about identity politics. This is obviously a difficult topic for anyone to talk about, let alone me, so I appreciate you for listening. I have some feelings that you might have some differing thoughts, so let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. Happy to get into a bit of a conversation with you there. If you like what I'm doing with this channel, you could support me by liking this video, sharing it with people, subscribing. I appreciate it very much. My name is James Lee. Thank you for your time today, and I'll see you next week.